July 25, 1950. The road to Taichung lay burning under a sun that turned the air into molten glass. Smoke rolled from shattered columns of American armor. A few miles east, the Naktung River shimmered beneath the haze, the last natural barrier before the heart of southern Korea. Along that crumbling front, among the broken convoys and blood-soaked rice paddies, one man moved with a fury that defied exhaustion. His name, General Walton H. Walker, commander of the U.S. 8th Army. To his men he was both savior and executioner, a man whose wrath could terrify even the battle-hardened. To the North Koreans pressing south with Soviet T-34s and reckless zeal, he would soon become the embodiment of American resistance, the bulldog, whose inhuman drive would halt their advance when no one else could. U.S. Army Operations Report, July 1950. Through the static of field radios, Walker's voice cut like a whip. "Hold! Hold at all costs!" The words echoed through makeshift trenches dug in mud that reeked of gasoline and blood. His soldiers, cooks, engineers, clerks pressed into rifle duty, clung to the hills around Pusan, their faces hollowed by fatigue. The North Korean People's Army, the NKPA, had swept south in just 5 weeks, driving the Americans back nearly 300 miles. Seoul had fallen. Daejeon was gone. The last hope lay behind a thin horseshoe of defenses known as the Pusan Perimeter, and at its center stood Walker. Far East Command Communique, Aug 1950. Few outside the theater understood the desperation. The U.S. Army, hollowed by post-war demobilization, had sent barely trained divisions armed with leftover World War II equipment. Their M24 Chaffee light tanks bounced shells off the thick armor of the NKPA's T-34-85s, Soviet-made monsters weighing 32 tons, their 85mm guns capable of tearing through anything short of a Pershing. Ordnance Report 1950. American infantry, many fresh from occupation duty in Japan, had little combat experience. The enemy, by contrast, was seasoned. Veterans of the Chinese Civil War, disciplined and well supplied through the Soviet pipeline at Wonsan. Walker knew the mathematics of collapse. He had seen it in France 1944 under Patton's command. But Korea was different. No wide plains, no roads worth the name, no organized retreat. Only chaos. Yet through it all, Walker's anger became fuel. Officers recalled his rages as volcanic, a torrent of curses that left staff trembling but also galvanized divisions on the brink. He was like a storm, one aide remembered, terrifying, but it cleared the air. 8th Army HQ Oral History, 1951. By late July, the line was fracturing near Daegu. Every mile lost exposed vital railheads feeding the port of Pusan, the Allied lifeline. Ammunition ran low, trucks clogged the narrow roads, supplies burned under strafing Yak fighters. But Walker refused evacuation orders or withdrawal plans. "We'll make our stand here," he growled. "We die or we hold." Command log, 27th July 1950. He ordered engineers to blow bridges only after the last American crossed, and sometimes not at all, daring enemy armor to overextend. As the perimeter constricted, so too did Walker's tolerance for hesitation. At one command post, he reportedly drew his sidearm on a lieutenant who suggested retreat. "You pull back, son, and I'll shoot you myself." The men believed him. Fear of Walker became a weapon, and for many a strange comfort. Personal Diary, 25th Infantry Regiment, Aug 1950. Behind the fury, however, was calculation. Walker's staff later revealed that his rants masked an intricate mental map. Supply routes, terrain gradients, artillery arcs, memorized down to the foot. He shifted regiments like chess pieces, shoring weak flanks before they cracked. His G2 intelligence teams intercepted NKPA movements, and his engineers retooled river crossings overnight. Engineer Corps Field Report, Aug 1950. The 8th Army's line hardened. Ammunition ships unloaded non-stop at Pusan's docks. By the first week of August, over 141,000 men, American, South Korean, and a few British units, formed a bulwark that the North Koreans could not easily breach. But to the soldiers on the ground, it still felt like a losing war. "The whole country's on fire," wrote one corporal. "We dig, we shoot, we fall back, and the old man screams for us to hold." Letter home. Aug 3, 1950. Each night, Walker's jeeps roared through the perimeter, headlights blacked out, as he appeared without warning at forward positions. He demanded names, unit numbers, casualty counts. He could quote the day's losses from memory. Officers dreaded his arrival, but after he left, their men always fought harder. At the same time, North Korean commanders began to notice a change. Their rapid advance stalled. Bridges once undefended were now mined. Artillery fire became precise, timed, relentless. Supply convoys started vanishing under American fighter bomber strikes. In captured reports, NKPA officers described a new energy among the enemy, driven, it seemed, by a single man's fury. Captured NKPA Operations Log, Aug 1950. The irony was cruel. Walker's temper, often seen as destructive in peacetime, became his greatest weapon in war. In briefings, he shattered coffee cups, slammed his fists on tables and hurled maps across rooms. But afterward, he issued meticulously reasoned orders. His rage was never blind. It was fuel for precision. He was the flame that burned off our fear, said a junior officer. Oral history, 27th Infantry Regiment. The press, restricted by censorship, only hinted at the desperation. To the public, Korea was a police action. To those inside the perimeter, it was the difference between survival and annihilation. In Walker's command trains, clerks worked 20-hour days routing trucks, plotting artillery fires and managing the endless tide of wounded. Hospitals overflowed. Water was rationed. Yet Walker, short and stocky with a gravel voice, refused to rest. He'd sleep 2 hours, one aide said, then wake up cursing the communists and go inspect another regiment. 8th Army Staff Memo, Aug 1950. Through August, the Pusan perimeter held unbarely. The NKPA launched repeated assaults across the Naktung, throwing entire divisions into the river's brown current. American howitzers lit the night with orange fire. The 24th, 25th and 1st Cavalry Divisions fought until their barrels glowed red. Walker's constant visits kept morale from collapsing. He promoted on the spot, punished instantly, and radioed Washington demanding replacements yesterday. Far East Command Signal transcript. Aug 1950. His men began to speak of him in mythic tones. The Bulldog, the Iron Ghost. When news reached them that MacArthur planned an amphibious strike far to the north at Incheon, they laughed bitterly. "We'll be dead before he lands," one soldier said. But Walker only snarled, "Then let's make sure the bastards die first." Field interview, 1st Cavalry, Aug 1950. The balance was finally shifting. Intelligence intercepts revealed North Korean shortages of fuel and ammunition. Their logistics, stretched thin over 400 miles, began to falter. For the first time, the 8th Army counterattacked, small thrusts testing the enemy's resolve. The lines that had bent for weeks began to stiffen. American artillerymen, once overwhelmed, now answered shell for shell. Walker's wrath had transformed fear into defiance, yet the cost was staggering. Tens of thousands lay wounded or dead. Villages vanished in the crossfire. The smell of burnt cordite and decay hung over every valley. Walker toured the field hospitals in silence, removing his helmet at each cot. To the nurses and medics, he was unexpectedly gentle. "You're fighting the hardest war of all," he told them. Army Nurse Corps interview, 1951. Then he turned away, the fury rekindling. There was still ground to hold. By early September, reconnaissance planes reported something extraordinary. The NKPA's relentless advance had stopped cold. For the first time since June, the tide no longer moved south. Deep in a bunker near Taegu, Walker spread his maps under a dim lantern and traced a line along the Naktung. He looked at his staff, hollow-eyed, uniforms stained with sweat and dust, and said only, "Now we turn the tables." 8th Army Command Diary, Sept 1950, and outside, the rain began to fall again, washing the blood from the roads. But none of them could yet see the storm building behind enemy lines, a secret maneuver that would change the entire war within weeks. Walker's fury had saved Korea once. What came next would test whether it could save it again. The night of September 14, 1950, brought thunder that wasn't weather. Off the coast near Incheon, naval guns thundered as General Douglas MacArthur's gamble unfolded, the Incheon landing. But far to the south, on the blood-soaked ridges of the Pusan perimeter, Walton Walker was waging a different kind of war, the war to hold long enough for that landing to matter. His hidden advantage wasn't a secret weapon or miracle technology. It was logistics, precision, and the raw, mechanical rhythm of the American war machine reawakening after 5 years of slumber. U.S. 8th Army Logistics Summary, Sept. 1950. At the heart of Walker's resurgence lay the Red Ball Express of the East, an improvised, tireless convoy network stretching from the port of Pusan to every division dug into the perimeter. Within a month, over 14,000 trucks from the squat 212-ton GMC Deuce and a Half to the massive M26 Dragon Wagon tank transporters rolled without pause. Quartermaster Report 1950. Engineers of the 2nd Logistical Command labored under constant enemy air raids to patch roads, build pontoon bridges, and establish refueling depots in rice paddies turned into motor pools. These nameless mechanics and drivers, some wearing sidearms, some barefoot in the mud, turned the tide as surely as any rifleman. "They brought us everything but sleep," one soldier joked grimly. Combat Logistics Diary, Sept. 1950. Behind the roaring engines lay the genius of men like Major General Leland Hobbs, who organized supply echelons by priority code, and civilian engineers from General Motors and Mack Truck, flown in from Japan to repair hundreds of seized vehicles. Even ammunition boxes bore the fingerprints of Detroit and Pittsburgh. The silent industries of the American heartland suddenly thrust back into total war. War Department Technical Bulletin 1950. Walker understood that machines without men were worthless, so he created what he called fire nodes, mobile logistics hubs combining repair crews, ordnance experts and medical stations, moving as fluidly as the front itself. Technical Manual TM 9281, 1950. When an M4A3E8 Sherman was disabled by a T-34 shell, field mechanics welded armor patches from wreckage and sent it back into battle within hours. It was improvised warfare, industrial grit meeting human endurance. The technical race between the American Sherman and the North Korean T-34-85 defined the next stage of the war. On paper, the Soviet tank outclassed its rival. 85mm D5T gun, 90mm frontal armor, 55km/h top speed. The American M4A3E8, nicknamed Easy 8, carried a 76mm high-velocity gun, 63mm frontal armor, 48km/h top speed. But by late August, American ordnance engineers, led by Lieutenant Colonel Charles R. Green, began issuing HVAP, high-velocity armor-piercing rounds, tungsten-cored shells capable of punching through 120mm of armor at 1,000 yards. Ordnance Field Report, AUG 1950. Overnight, the duel shifted. For the first time, Shermans could meet T-34s head-on and win. On September 1st, the NKPA launched its final desperate offensive, the Second Battle of the Nakhtong Bulge. Rain fell in sheets, turning the riverbanks into quagmires. The 9th and 4th NKPA divisions crossed the swollen river on makeshift rafts under darkness. American sentries caught the sound of oars slapping water before the first mortars landed. By dawn, entire regiments were cut off. The 1st Cavalry Division's lines crumpled. Reports flooded in. Bridges blown, radio silence, enemy armor in the rear. 8th Army Operations Journal, Sept. 1950. Walker responded like a man possessed. From his forward command post near Taegu, he grabbed a field phone, barking orders that merged fury with surgical precision. "Move the 27th Infantry now. Bring the 6th Tank Battalion up the ridge. Hit them from the flank." Signal Corps transcript, Sept. 1950. He summoned the Provisional Marine Brigade, recently landed at Pusan, into the maelstrom. Within hours, their M26 Pershings weighing 46 tons with 102mm frontal armor and a 90mm M3 gun thundered toward the Nakhtong. Technical Manual TM 9734, 1950. In the chaos, coordination was everything. The secret weapon was FM radio. Developed during World War II by engineers at Motorola and Western Electric, these short-range sets allowed tankers, infantry, and aircraft to speak in real time, a technology the NKPA lacked entirely. Signal Corps Field Notes, 1950. As Walker's armored columns advanced, pilots from the 5th Air Force circled overhead. Guided by radio beacons from forward air controllers, crouched in rice paddies. "Enemy tanks at the tree line. Mark with smoke," crackled a voice. Seconds later, F-51 Mustangs dived, their rockets slicing through the mist. 5th Air Force Mission Log, Sept. 1950. By noon on September 3rd, the fields along the Naktung were ablaze. North Korean tanks burned in rows, their ammunition cooking off in staccato bursts. Infantry fell back across the river, leaving behind piles of weapons and the bodies of men who had marched 300 miles only to die within sight of victory. For the first time since the invasion began, the NKPA broke, not just militarily but psychologically. Captured diaries spoke of the American general who never sleeps, who drives his men like iron beasts. Captured NKPA diary, Sept 1950. Walker's logistical genius ensured that the victory didn't stall. His rolling depots advanced behind the counterattack, refueling tanks within 2 miles of combat. In one 24-hour period, the 8th Army consumed 250,000 gallons of gasoline and 2,300 tons of ammunition, a feat of coordination unmatched since Normandy. Quartermaster Operations Record 1950. While the NKPA starved for shells, Walker's artillery fired until barrels glowed red. The engineers of the 11th Engineer Combat Battalion became silent heroes. They rebuilt Naktung bridges under sniper fire, laying Bailey Bridge sections by lantern light. "Every bolt we drove was a life saved," wrote one sergeant. Engineer Corps Memoir 1951. The next morning, American tanks rolled across those bridges, smashing the remnants of the NKPA spearhead. The transformation wasn't merely tactical, it was moral. Soldiers who once whispered of retreat now spoke of payback. "The Bulldog's rage kept us alive," recalled one private. When he yelled, it felt like the whole army roared with him. Oral History Collection, 1952. Yet to Walker, emotion was nothing without control. Each night, in his underground command post, he studied aerial reconnaissance photos spread across a steel table. His staff recalled him muttering, "If I can just hold the line one more week, MacArthur will land and the nightmare will end." 8th Army Staff Notes, Sept 1950. That week arrived. On September 15th, as dawn broke over the Yellow Sea, Operation Chromite began. Marines stormed Incheon seawalls under the guns of the 7th Fleet. The landing, audacious and almost impossible, trapped half the North Korean army between MacArthur's northward thrust and Walker's forces pressing from the south. U.S. Navy Action Report, Set 1950. The Pusan defenders, an exhausted, mud-caked, half-starved, heard the news crackle over radio sets. Cheers erupted through the trenches, but Walker didn't pause to celebrate. "Drive north," he ordered. "Kill every T-34 that moves." Command Transmission, September 1950. Within days, the 8th Army surged forward, crossing the Naktung and sweeping up broken NKPA regiments. The 5th Regimental Combat Team advanced 25 miles in a single day, an unthinkable pace only weeks earlier. Bridges once scenes of defeat, now thundered with convoys moving north. 8th Army Progress Report, Sept 1950. The Second Battle of the Naktung had ended in total reversal. Over 13,000 North Korean casualties, 268 tanks destroyed, and over 3,000 prisoners captured. American losses, though heavy, were sustainable, roughly 1,400 killed or wounded. Department of the Army Statistical Summary, 1951. Analysts later called it the hinge of the war. Without Walker's perimeter, Incheon would have failed before it began. Walker's fury had proven to be more than emotion. It was a method, a system forged from discipline, engineering, and unyielding will. Beneath the smoke and steel, his logistics, radio coordination, and mechanized improvisation had transformed retreat into victory. U.S. Strategic Analysis, 1953. Yet even in triumph a shadow loomed. As his armored spearheads raced north, Walker reportedly told a correspondent, "War's not done. Not till the last man stops running." Stars and Stripes interview, Sept 1950, he was right. Beyond the 38th parallel lay mountains, frozen rivers, and a new enemy waiting in silence. The fury that saved Korea would soon face its greatest and final test. By late November 1950, the map of Korea looked unrecognizable. The 8th Army, once cornered against the sea at Pusan, now stretched hundreds of miles north to the Yalu River, the edge of China itself. To the outside world, it seemed America had reversed an impossible defeat. But inside command tents and freezing foxholes, General Walton H. Walker knew victory was an illusion, fragile as frost. Beneath the triumph lay exhaustion, broken machines, and a new invisible storm rolling down from the mountains. U.S. Army Situation Report, Nov 1950. The transformation wrought by Walker's inhuman fury had carried the United Nations command through the darkest phase of the Korean War. His unrelenting discipline had created a logistical miracle. 8,000 miles of supply roads carved from mud and mountain, over 5 million tons of cargo delivered to the front by truck, train and ship between August and November. Quartermaster Statistical Review, 1951. Engineers had laid down pipelines across ravines and frozen streams, allowing the army to move faster than any invading force in modern Korean history. But with every mile gained, Walker's burden deepened. His soldiers, the same men who once feared his wrath, now worshipped him as a talisman of survival. Where Walker went, the line held, one sergeant later recalled. He was like the engine of the whole damn war. Infantry Oral Archive, 1952. Yet the man himself was visibly burning out. The fury that had once propelled him now ate at his strength. Staff officers described him pacing alone at night, maps unrolled, eyes red from lack of sleep. He chain-smoked through every briefing. He fought the war as if it were a personal duel, wrote one aide. 8th Army Field Memoir, 1951. Then came the cold. Temperatures plunged to 30°C in the northern valleys. Engines froze solid, rifles jammed, and men's faces turned black with frostbite. The Chinese People's Volunteer Army, hundreds of thousands strong, emerged from the mountains in disciplined waves, their white parkas blending with the snow. Intelligence Intercept, Nov 1950. The 8th Army, stretched thin and undersupplied, found itself under sudden, ferocious assault. For Walker, the nightmare had returned, the encirclement, the collapsing flanks, the chaos of retreat. This time, though, there would be no panic. Walker's fury turned cold, almost surgical. "We hold the line again," he told his staff. "We've done it before. We'll do it again." Command Journal, Nov 1950. His mastery of logistics once more became his weapon. He ordered all depots south of Pyongyang evacuated within 72 hours, an operation that moved 180,000 tons of material and nearly 100,000 men southward under constant attack. Transportation Corps After Action Report, Dec 1950. American convoys threaded mountain passes through sleet and artillery fire, guided by engineers who used burning fuel drums as beacons in the snow. Chinese radio intercepts later revealed disbelief. One captured officer wrote, "We thought them beaten, but their general drives them like machines." Captured PLA Intelligence Note, 1951. That general was Walker. Even as MacArthur's optimism collapsed in Tokyo, Walker held the 8th Army together through sheer force of will. He issued orders to establish the Seoul defensive line, reorganizing shattered units into cohesive fighting groups. "No army dies if it keeps moving," he declared. 8th Army Command Summary, Dec 1950. His words echoed through every regiment, every foxhole. But fate, indifferent to valor, struck on December 23, 1950. At 11:25 a.m., while traveling from his forward command post near Uijeongbu to inspect defenses north of Seoul, Walker's command jeep collided with a South Korean truck on the icy road. The impact was instant. His driver survived. Walker did not. Army Investigation File, Dec 1950. News of his death spread through the front like a thunderclap. Soldiers who had endured months of combat under his rage and protection wept openly. One captain radioed simply, "The Bulldog's gone," the signal log, Dec 1950. The immediate impact was paralysis. For 2 days, command coordination faltered. Men spoke of Walker in the present tense, unwilling to accept he was gone. At Taegu, a chaplain wrote, "He was more than a general. He was the spirit of resistance itself." Chaplain's Journal, Dec 1950. Even enemy reports noted a sharp drop in American aggressiveness during those days. Captured PLA Field Report, Jan 1951. When General Matthew B. Ridgway took command, he found an army still running on the fuel Walker had given it. Discipline born of fury. Strategically, Walker's legacy endured in every logistical doctrine that followed. His concept of mobile support zones, constantly shifting, self-sufficient depots, became the foundation of modern mechanized warfare. Army Doctrine Development Memo, 1953. Engineers studied his Pusan logistics to design modular supply systems later used in Vietnam and the Gulf War. Walker's insistence on radio integration between infantry, armor and air units foreshadowed the network-centric operations of the 21st century. Signal Corps Doctrine Review 1962. In every sense, the inhuman fury that defined him became codified into cold, efficient military science. Psychologically, his effect on the Eighth Army was profound. Soldiers who had once considered Korea a doomed campaign now believed in inevitability, that American endurance, when driven hard enough, could outlast any enemy. Army Psychological Evaluation 1952. This morale shift proved decisive. When Ridgway rallied the troops weeks later, invoking Walker's name, entire divisions shouted back, "For the Bulldog!" Stars and Stripes, Jan 1951. It was not mere sentiment, it was faith forged in mud and fire, but the price of that transformation was immense. Over 35,000 Allied dead, 80,000 wounded, and thousands more frozen or missing. Villages erased, cities leveled, families scattered across a peninsula now permanently divided. UN War Damage Report 1952. Walker's fury had saved South Korea, but it could not save it whole. Yet his example revealed a truth older than gunpowder, that leadership in war is not born from charisma or intellect alone, but from an elemental refusal to yield. In post-war analyses, military historians often compared Walker to Patton, his mentor, his opposite, his mirror. Both shared volcanic tempers and relentless drive, but where Patton sought glory, Walker sought survival. His men did not love him. They obeyed him, and that obedience kept them alive when every calculation said they should have perished. U.S. Army Command Study 1955. Korean veterans who later fought in Vietnam described invoking Walker's name when situations turned hopeless. To them, Walker's fury wasn't anger, it was faith under fire. In Seoul, after the armistice, South Koreans built a small memorial overlooking the Han River. Its inscription read, "To the man whose rage bought our freedom." Korean War Memorial Archives, 1957. Few visitors knew the full story of the logistics lines built from nothing, the convoys that never stopped, the engineers who worked until their hands bled, all because one man refused to accept defeat. Even decades later, in military academies from West Point to Sandhurst, Walker's stand at the Pusan perimeter remains a case study in crisis command. His unyielding temperament, once seen as dangerous, is now taught as a model of leadership under existential pressure. When systems fail, one instructor notes, so you need a man whose fury can become a system. U.S. Army War College Lecture, 1987. And perhaps that is his truest legacy. Not just the miles of road or tons of ammunition, but the psychological blueprint for how a broken army rediscovers its strength. Walker's fury was never madness. It was a controlled detonation, aimed not at his men but at despair itself. Strategic Leadership Review, 1991. As winter light faded over the Korean hills where he once stood, veterans would recall his voice, gravel and smoke, roaring through static. Hold! Hold at all costs! They held then, and generations since have echoed that defiance in jungles, deserts, and mountains. In the end, Walton H. Walker did not live to see the war's uneasy armistice. But the line he drew, that invisible boundary between chaos and endurance, became immortal. Because sometimes in the darkest hours of war, victory does not come from calm reason or measured command. It comes from fury, the kind that refuses to break, refuses to bend, and turns ordinary men into legends.